Closing it out here. Yeah. Don't cheer yet. We're not. So good afternoon. We'd first like to pay our respects to the Algonquin people, traditional custodians of the land in which Carleton University campus is situated, and from where we work in Saskatoon, apparently lots of fans, Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. We're here to chat a bit about sustaining old digital projects and making room for new ones. So I'll cover some of the background. Joel here will discuss the difficulties of inheriting custom-built databases, and Ahmad will talk about the rationale for our approach to using a centralized CMS and some related use cases. So the background, I'm a big coffee fan. That's all you need to know. We made custom cortados there. So the Digital Research Center started in the College of Arts and Sciences around 20 years ago. It was a fairly early DH space that was CFI funded and mostly dedicated to working with digital humanists in the English department. It was a successful operation with limited opportunities for growth and with a whole whack of sustainability challenges. In 2016, the then coordinator and I started discussing the possibility of moving the DRC to the library, in part because he was taking up a tenure track position and wouldn't be able to continue in his role. And it also seemed like a good time to extend the support that the DRC provided to more colleges across campus. The library invested in the space, so there was like an early renovation, and we have another one forthcoming, and the DRC's sort of close proximity to the University Archives and Special Collections, along with the computing division of our Canadian Hub for Applied and Social Research. We always use the CHASER acronym, so it's hard to say. Anyway, it meant that it would be sort of developing an area in the library that was dedicated to some of the research that was going on, and sort of take a more strategic approach there. Those of you who have experience with DH and DS centers know all about the wild and crazy projects that are sort of variously developed and funded and sort of fall in the laps of centers like ours. The DRC is no different, and I would consider the sustainability, preservation, and ongoing maintenance of those inherited projects the biggest and most aggravating challenges we have. From the outset, sustainability became almost a tick in our speech. We keep saying it, and we would come to realize that balancing sort of a sustainable approach and a trying new things approach would be a huge factor in how we approached the projects we supported. Lastly, our organizational changes and evolving needs have played a pretty big role in 2019, 2020. Our central ICT sort of absorbed our LS&IT, and again, this isn't unusual. Many academic libraries went through the same thing, mostly, as far as I'm told, because of security concerns. But there's an increased frustration over the flexibility or loss of flexibility based on those security restrictions on campus. And it's something that we continually have to deal with. Nevertheless, it's not the case that we have 4 programmers to support the DRC and digital scholarship across campus, and we no longer have sort of a in-house IT department. But moving Joel into the DS coordinator position a couple of years ago, and last year just hiring Ahmad has sort of allowed us to counter some of those challenges we've faced with the reorg. We're still running overloaded and essentially keep much of what we do very low key, but it's a step in the right direction. So I'm going to hand it over to Joel to talk about inheriting some of those older projects.
Thanks, Ray. I can't believe he made me Dwight, but anyway. It sounds like some of you know about Saskatchewan, but for those who don't, that is indeed a picture of Saskatchewan.
The whole place looks like that.
It's flat. It's as flat as God intended. So my introduction into what would become the DRC started with a project we did called Sask History Online that was funded by the government back when governments had money, and it was supported by the Ministry of Education. And it had one specific requirement, that we provide preservation for digital assets and continual online access to digitized materials from any GLAM, that is gallery, library, archive, museum, from the province. So as a result, we selected a software called Islandora, which is kind of like a Drupal, Fedora, G-Search sandwich, or I think they use a hamburger now, to try and provide these solutions. So after that project ended, we began working with our own archive, making new projects, but also inheriting a bunch of them. And it was sort of a smorgasbord of bespoke projects created from custom Perl, PHP. They had some Microsoft Access databases, and other technologies that use cavernous amounts of HTML web pages, hyperlinking each other, the information's super highway era. So each one was designed from the ground up, and we started to see some patterns forming, maybe some style sheets being reused. But basically, they were having to create new sites from the ground up every time, and of course, this took forever. So the SRSD site here, which we now have a massive grant to try and bring into the 21st century, 22 years in, is maybe the pinnacle of this, which, even a small change like a typo required a bunch of coding changes because of its labyrinthal structure. So a few years ago, I took a short course at the Digital Humanities Summer Institute from Quinn Dombrowski, and she puts it like this. Previously doing this kind of work necessitated a sizable budget to support a large team of programmers, which we didn't have, who would develop both the technical underpinnings and the user interface from scratch, and this approach had considerable drawbacks. Programmers would often duplicate work that had been done from earlier projects, but was never shared in a usable form. So one of our challenges was to fix, patch up, and otherwise keep alive some of these old sites, or let them die. And one of the approaches we went with, which was using a CMS, our existing Islandora implementation allowed us to use the Drupal multi-site infrastructure and use pre-built themes to create sites that were, had fairly limited overhead, but were secure, repeatable, and functional. So you can see we have a couple here that look pretty similar because they're using some predefined theming. So the most important part of this was that due to the extreme bottleneck in programming at the U of S, we were able to offset some of the work. Drupal allows even non-technical users to develop a robust and highly customized environment. So due to Islandora's complex structure and object-oriented design, we began to use just Drupal for some of the more digital humanities-focused projects and those without preservation requirements. So some of the important reasons why we chose Drupal over other CMSs include the fact that it was open source, which was such a big part of SAS History Online's mandate. And it allowed, with very limited budget, the ability to use some centralized management. And in some cases, we even were able to contribute back. It's also got a continuous development model, so it was resistant to some of the extreme deprecation we saw in some of those old archives websites. It has a wide variety of modules, which was sort of self-contained unit of functionality, which were able to be found, downloaded, installed quickly and with technical expertise. And some of the security and more difficult aspects of it were handled by someone else who was maintaining it. We had a lot of prior experience with PHP and Drupal in-house. We were using Drupal since Drupal 4 for things like landing pages. And it had a small footprint. Some of those technologies I mentioned earlier, combined with Postgres, MySQL, DocuWiki, Python, Django, were impossible to keep up with, let alone have in-house expertise with the few programmers we had. So consolidating our footprint was a very important part of what we were trying to do. And I'll let Ahmad keep going here.
Thanks. Thanks, Joel. So Drupal has, like other CMSs, just uses a relational database, but that database is, the structure of that database is abstracted, so the users actually don't really see the complexity of the relations between the tables. And so that kind of simplifies data collection and pre-processing. And with a CMS like Drupal, we're able to provide researchers with long-term, cost-effective support that kind of frees up time for other stuff, which is, I guess, our main focus here. But yeah. It has also allowed us to quickly set up basic websites for projects with either little funding or uncomplicated data. But again, same theme. It allows us, to spend more time on more complex projects, projects with larger funding and just nuanced features, unique requirements. The GUI of a CMS like Drupal also allows us to offload some of the work to some non-tech staff. That includes you, Joel. But
Yeah. Take it.
yeah, and so it's with the forms, the built-in edit forms that we have here, it also does type checking for us. So, we're not afraid that Joel will enter alpha characters in numeric values, but
Theoretically.
well, and so one of the big factors that kind of influenced us is the domain-specific requirements. So some research projects have specific requirements. Like, for example, one we did recently was building a GIS system for a GIS lab at USask, and Drupal allowed us to kind of abstract a lot of the API calls and connections to our GIS modules. Not only that, it also allowed us to provide greater customization to our researchers. So enables us to empower the user so that they can do a lot of stuff without needing our help. It also promotes collaboration, because using our own authentication module, which uses USask IDs, along with just the Drupal profiles that we were able to create, researchers can collaborate relatively easily and access files and share files on a secure platform. So at the DRC, we have two main blanket use cases. The new research projects like the 8GIS one, and a plethora of old projects that we have to migrate to Drupal, painstakingly, but part of the job. And so setting up a simple website for a new project is fairly straightforward. We follow this 8-step process, and it has allowed us to reduce the time to set up a new website significantly. And so both new and old projects can be divided into these 4 subcategories. And these are public-facing research websites, which used to be built with custom PHP and Postgres, Django, and this led to some security concerns and some custom code and constant need for upgrading quite significantly. Internal research databases we have, which used to be built using, again, PHP, some MySQL with Workbench front ends, and some just using Excel. And then we have the domain-specific software websites that need integration with those. this one is the wild card. Like we've seen, different technologies being used for this one, but with Drupal we were able to kind of just use one main CMS for all of those. And then finally, the collection of articles, and we have one art book that was built originally with PHP and Postgres, but we're able to port it to Drupal and kind of allow the researcher to kind of do her job as the editor of this online collection of essays. Okay, so here are a few examples of new projects and migrations. So this is an example of a migration where we had to overhaul the user interface and add a bunch of new functionality like robust search and interactive pieces on the website. And again, this is coming from PHP, custom PHP to Drupal. And this is the HGIS website, and this was new, this one just has large amounts of data and complex data that required domain-specific knowledge and a lot of QGIS work. And then finally, this one's just a research database, and this is just internal and just a bare bones interface, but then we are able to kind of use a more user-friendly and flexible system for researchers to work with. I'm gonna just zip past here. Okay. And so just to conclude, our main goal is to just be able to use a CMS for most websites so that we have time to do projects that require a lot of energy and effort to implement new, cool, unique features. That's our talk, and live long and prosper.
Thank you very much to the three of you. I didn't find there anything sensational about this at all. I thought it was very sensible, very considered approach. So thank you. It's wonderful that those old sites are getting a new life. I've got a MySpace page that maybe I can send you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just some questions. This is great work, but a lot of work, exclamation point. When will you decide to not recreate a site? At what point is it better to archive a project and let it go?
That's a very good question. Some of it's if it's ongoing work. So if the researcher is still actively using the site, that's obviously takes a big box there, an important one. And it depends. So there's sort of a bit of a criteria that we have for assessing the site. Some of the older, like really older ones, there's a lot of retired people. If they don't get back to us, we're archiving it, and that sort of thing. So yeah. And then there's just a long list, a prioritization list, and we kind of pick our way through that using our project management software, and do what we can.
Wow, but you've got your hands full for the time being.
Yeah, exactly. I think Ahmed's job's pretty secure for sure. That's one of the reasons we hired him.
That's good. That's the sustainable part, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question, where or how do you draw the line in scoping out the allowable level of customization per project?
I don't know.
Do you want to speak to it?
Well, so again, it's different with an old project versus a new one. So there's a consultation process that happens with a new project, and we scope that fairly well, right? Like we discuss what the requirements are and where we stop and start. Some of the web design stuff is where we got into trouble in the past. So we would, continually be doing designy stuff for a long time, and that that ate up a lot of resources. So yeah, the initial, again, new projects, a lot easier. We lay that all out. The older stuff, it just depends on if they want to bring the functionality of what they had 15 years ago into a newer functionality and, UI and all that kind of stuff. And so often we're doing the least that we can in that respect, and encouraging new funding and sustainability models that way. But yeah.
I could add so my background is from the archives, and then the Saskatchewan Land Project, and working with archives again before coming in here, and those were all often collections focused and were in-house and whatever. When we took over the DRC from Arts and Science, they had a grant funding model that didn't get used a lot in internal library projects. So also we see how much money they have, and so that helps limit things in a way that for our old internal projects didn't exist. So that helps kind of scope out how far into the weeds we get with any kinds of customization or yeah.
Wow. Okay, because the one example that caught my eye was it's like a graphic of a turtle. It looked like he'd updated that and changed it, made it look more contemporary. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. We outsourced some design with that one too, which was nice. Again, the design stuff can take up so much time. So in that case, we were able to outsource that particular bit. Yeah.
Maybe a more pragmatic question. What version of Drupal are you using? Any strategies to keep up with the updates of Drupal?
Yeah, we have. We're using the latest Drupal 9, and just to keep up with it, we have 3 servers, production, test, and development, and we try to keep them synced. And this is one of the benefits of using a CMS and trying to get most of your websites built on that CMS. You have to upgrade one system. So we don't have to upgrade a bunch of things. So we just upgrade one system. And some of the upgrades can take longer. Like, for example, Drupal 7 to 8 took quite a bit, but 8 to 9 was kind of seamless.
That's fortunate. Another question, how are you handling imports? Feeds, JSON-API. I don't know what that means, but
well, Drupal has, because it's open source, it has a large developer community. So you can find modules to do CSV imports, but it's not very powerful. So when we want to do custom imports, we write a module for each project, but it's boilerplated, and that's the beauty. So once we have the YML for the configuration, all you really need to know is what's the structure of the data and how your content types are structured, and so then you can easily write a YML and
sounds good. So it's future-proof to some extent.
As
To some
future-proof
extent.
as it can be, I guess.
Okay. More questions. Are you implementing any Drupal modules to facilitate search within internal research databases?
Yes, we are. Some of them, we haven't published a few of them, just because, again, one programmer. But yeah, just like an import module, we have one for HGIS for the geographic information systems, but again, not published yet. So
You'll get there.
yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And maybe the final question, are you using a shared Drupal installation, or each project has its own Drupal instance, and why?
Yes, it's shared. So we're using Drupal multi-sites, and setting up a multi-site is very quick and easy. So there's just one installation for a DRC server, and then we have like 20 multi-sites on that one installation, and it's fairly scalable. So
The most time-consuming part is getting a URL from the researcher for that.